We hope, thank you. We hope comes available here very shortly, or at least we know what's going to happen. We've all kind of been left in the dark as far as this thing goes, and I kind of have the history and stuff like that as we kind of go through this PowerPoint here. Also wanted to touch upon just like other challenges that are facing in college athletics right now. Obviously, the Alston case is something that's going to be an issue as well. COVID-19, that's been impacting not only the academic center staff members, but also the student athletes and everybody who's in athletics. It's affected us in some way, shape, or form. And then that kind of comes into the mental health side of things as well. So we'll touch upon all those particular areas. But the first part here is just the whole name, image, and likeness. And essentially, what is this? Okay. So what this would allow is for student athletes to use their name, image, and likeness for a benefit. Okay, to promote themselves, to receive compensation for themselves and stuff like that. So they could be brand ambassadors for a company. Social media, I think, is huge in the brand ambassador area. So this would allow them to do that. They'd be able to feature products, give recommendations, promote them, all those kind of things for a fee, which is something student athletes have never been able to do before. Promote social or commercial products, businesses, sign autographs for a fee, do appearances, all those kind of things. Camps and clinics, again, those are areas where student athletes will be able to essentially make some money for themselves in areas that they haven't been able to do before. So this is a huge deal. This is something that should have happened, quite frankly, a long time ago. If you all recall, this whole push kind of began with the Northwestern football student athletes and them trying to navigate themselves into being what they would consider institutional staff members, being employees of the institution so that they could be paid. That kind of paved the way for a lot of things here to occur. The thing with the name, image, and likeness that the NCAA is, I guess, putting out there for a proposal, it would not allow student athletes to be paid for their play. Okay, so we've heard a lot of things there for that particular stuff, and that Northwestern was the first school that kind of tried to pave that. And the NCAA is not going to allow that for us to pay student athletes or allow boosters to pay student athletes based on the performance that they have on the field or on the court, the gym, whatever it is. Okay, so that is out of the question. So this is the other avenue that they have, is to allow student athletes to free open the spot for them to use their name, image, and likeness to benefit for themselves. So how did it all start? As I talked about, it was the whole Northwestern football student athlete thing. That's kind of where it all started. But California was the first state to put forth some legislation to allow student athletes to use their name, image, or likeness. And that was back in September of 2019. Now, they wanted to be aggressive, but they didn't want to be too aggressive. So for that particular case, they decided that, hey, by January of 2023, that's when this is going to go into effect. It gives you 4 years or 3.5 years to kind of figure this out at NCAA. If you don't figure something out, then our state law is going to go into effect. And therefore, all the prospective student athletes that would be at other institutions are going to go out to the West Coast. Okay, so that puts some heat on the NCAA, and that also put heat on other states. So you see California do that, and then like, whoa, California is going to have a recruiting advantage over our other institutions in other states. So therefore, Florida and all kinds of other states have put forth bills to be passed within their legislature dealing with name, image, and likeness. They're all different. They're all unique in some way, shape, or form. I'd say the most unique is probably New York, where there really is no restrictions on anything that the student athletes can do. But as of to date, there's 6 states that have NLI bills that would go into effect. Obviously, the one that's most closest to us is Florida here, which would go into effect in July 1st of this year, which has put enormous pressure on the NCAA to figure this out and to figure out how we can make this work in a short period of time. As you know, we have just a few months left until this particular bill would go into effect in the state of Florida. And then there's several other states that are currently pending bills, and we are one of those states here in Louisiana. So there's a lot of things that are going on. There's a lot of shifting here. I can't say I know where it's gonna go. The only thing that I can assure you is that there's gonna be changes that will occur. Okay, whether that's from the NCAA side of things, if it's from the federal government side of things, or if it's state by state. Just don't know. Hopefully it's not state by state. That would get a little dicey, dealing with all those different state laws and stuff like that, and everybody kind of having a free reign for what they think is permissible under the name, image, and likeness for student athletes to deal with on their particular institutions' campuses. State laws obviously precede anything that the NCAA has, so therefore that's why the heat is up on the NCAA to get something done, because if they don't, then those state laws will go into effect, and then we'll be dealing with a lot of issues there with that. So proposals that the NCAA has put together, which I'll go through in the next few slides here, is they were supposed to vote on this in January of this year at their annual convention. There was some discussion about it, but there was never any decision that was made. Okay, they decided to punt that until a later date. Hopefully here in April, we have a little more clarity on exactly where they plan to go with this. But as of now, we don't know what the NCAA is actually going to do. They've given us some suggestions on the routes that they want to take, but it's so unclear, and there's a lot of things that could change that we just don't know. So we'll continue to look into it. We'll continue to have updates, hopefully from the NCAA here. I think they meet again April 15th. So at that point, we hope to have another update on where this goes, because we just have a short window essentially to figure out what is going to be permissible, what's not going to be permissible, and to essentially educate all of our coaches, all of our staff, and most important, all of the student athletes. So there's a lot of things here that need to be worked out in a short amount of time. We were told by our conference office that if you're going to take a vacation, plan to do that in May or early June, because July is just going to be such a hassle with everything that's going on with this name, image, and likeness stuff. So how were the proposals divvied out by the NCAA? They essentially did 4 separate proposals. Okay, so there's 4 different areas that each institution will be able to vote on here. I took these directly off of the NCAA site. So this first one here is 2026. Okay, and what this would allow is obviously student athletes to use their name, image, and likeness. It says as specified, which I kind of provided below and touched upon before, is like those autograph sessions. Okay, so allowing student athletes to essentially set up shop right out front, their apartment complex, or go to an auto dealership, whatever it is, sign autographs for a fee. Okay, and those fan days and stuff like that that we're all accustomed to, where you could go in and get student athletes to sign autographs for you, that's put on by the institution. Well, those might no longer be applicable. We may not have to have those or be able to have those anymore, because student athletes are going to be required to, or they're going to have the ability to make some money off of that. So those will kind of be areas that the NCAA will look at as far as the autographs go. Fee for lessons, student athletes can already provide fee for lessons to student athletes. They just can't use our facilities, and they cannot promote it on their social media accounts. Okay, so this would allow them to one, potentially use our facilities. I think if they did, they'd have to pay a fee for it. But most importantly, this would allow student athletes to be able to promote that using their social media accounts. Okay, instead of like a word by mouth promotion, just blasting something out on social media. Hey, meet me at Park so-and-so on Tuesday, and I'll provide lessons to anybody who wants them at that particular time. That's a fair thing for student athletes to do, I would assume. Promotion of their own businesses. We've had student athletes in the past who have owned their own businesses. And as part of that, the NCAA allowed them to have their own business, but any promotions that were dealing with that business, they had to open up a separate social media account. Okay, so they'd have to set up like essentially a business account for their social media. They wouldn't be able to promote anything using the social media account, their primary social media account that has all their followers. So therefore, there was some flexibility, but it wasn't enough. Student athletes just they couldn't really do anything with that. So any promotions they had to do was with some company social media account that just didn't have any followers to it. So they weren't able to use the name, image, and likeness. They had to separate it. They had to separate their personal social media account and their business social media account. They couldn't even mention their name and representing themselves as a student athlete in any way, shape, or form. So that was a very restrictive place that we were at. Hopefully that gets massaged out a little bit too, where student athletes can have their own businesses and use their primary social media account to promote that. And then promotion of other corporate entities. Again, this is kind of I feel like this is going to be a big area for student athletes, whether it's on social media or if it's just in person at a particular institution that they're at in the hometown there, or their hometown even, where they're going to be promoting businesses, restaurants, those kind of things, whether that's in social media or making appearances. I see student athletes being able to utilize that pretty regularly, and that being a good deal for them. Promotional events, again, those are the things. I think one of the things, I'll just disclose I'm not social media savvy, but there is something out there, I think that's Cameo or something, where you can put something like a request out there, where you can send a message to somebody and it's a couple $100, or you can have a fee that's associated with that. We see student athletes being able to utilize that in some way, shape, or form for, like, little kids' birthday parties and things like that. So, and then being brand ambassadors. So the social media side of things, we've had a lot of student athletes who have had companies reach out to them and they want them to promote different gear that they have and those kind of things. So this would allow those student athletes that flexibility to promote that and to obviously receive the gear and to be able to receive a fee for that. The issues with this, where I see it right now, is these student athletes, as it's written under the NCAA proposal, is they would not be able to use institutional marks. Okay, so they wouldn't be able to say, for us anyway, they wouldn't be able to say that they're from LSU, or they wouldn't be able to put any pictures out there with them in their LSU jerseys and anything like that. Okay, to me, that seems like a far stretch. And I think that's why the federal government is getting involved, is because of that fact that the NCAA is just still being too restrictive with this, and they need to open it up for the student athletes to benefit as much as they can off of this significant change in the history of the NCAA. So I feel like that's going to be a big part of it. And I hope for all of our sake that student athletes will be able to use their institutional marks, LSU marks, whatever school you're at, their marks, because not only does it help those student athletes, it also helps out the institutions and building up their brands and their promotion and all those things as well. So hopefully the NCAA allows that. If not, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be hard for compliance administrators to figure out in this particular realm, dealing with the institutional marks of these student athletes using them and having to shut down particular promotions and stuff like that they have because they're wearing an LSU hat or something like that. The next one here, hopefully y'all can see this. Next one here is the same thing, but this is for prospective student athletes. Okay, so it'd be the same thing as what the student athletes would have. It'd just be removed to the prospective student athletes. By definition, a prospective student athlete is anybody who has started classes for the 9th grade in high school. Regardless if they have athletic ability or not, they're considered a prospective student athlete, and they remain a prospective student athlete essentially until they enroll full-time at a collegiate institution. So in layman's terms, this is talking about high school students and allowing them to use their name, image, likeness as well. In a lot of the same categories as you would for student athletes. The thing here, or the issue that we'd have to work out is how do you keep this out of the recruiting realm? Okay, that's where a lot of schools, and that's where the NCAA is seeing a lot of worry here, is that this is going to be used as a recruiting tool for these prospective student athletes. Okay, you have a booster from so-and-so dealership reach out to this prospective student athlete for us, let's say in California, and tie them to a name, image, and likeness deal while they're still a prospective student athlete. Okay, how is that all going to work? Was it orchestrated through the coaching staff? Was it something that was actually just done by the booster? How is that going to play into the whole recruiting process? And so there's a lot of things in there that need to be worked out in order to make everybody feel a little more comfortable in this particular space with respect to student athletes being able to use their name, image, and likeness. Also part of the recruiting process, right? I talked to a couple of coaches, and really the only thing that some of these prospective student athletes want to know right now is, what can you do for me? What kind of deals would you be able to guarantee for me? And under the NCAA thing is institutions can't be involved at all in this whole name, image, and likeness space. Okay, all we can do is provide education to the student athletes, to the staff, those kind of things. We can't help them out with any way, shape, or form with any name, image, and likeness deals. Okay, so then you're kind of crossing hairs here with this. If prospective students are asking coaches what you can do, and then coaches go out and seek from boosters what type of deals they can get for this prospective student in order for them to come to your institution. The next one here, 2028, is dealing with professional service providers. Okay, so for us in compliance area, this is kind of where it gets more interesting because this does bring on those agents, financial advisors, marketing reps, all those individuals to help student athletes with navigating through the name, image, and likeness space. Okay, the break off or the cutoff line is that this would only allow for an arrangement to be signed for the agent to help the student athlete with navigating through name, image, and likeness stuff. It would not allow them to seek out professional teams and see who's interested in those sort of things. So there's a hard line there. The issue is if you have an agent who's helping you represent them in name, image, and likeness deals, how's that not also going to help out with professional deals down the line? I would assume that if you're signing up with a particular agent to help you out on this side of things, you're going to also have that same agent on the other side of things. So that's one area of concern there for a lot of individuals involved in this process is trying to figure out how can those individuals be used. And by individuals, I mean marketing reps, agents, advisors, all those individuals in a safe manner where these student athletes, where they can use them for the name, image, likeness space. And we get that they need help trying to figure out contracts, trying to read contracts and that sort of thing. But having that removed from the agent, assisting them with professional negotiations down the line. And that's just kind of going off of what I had there. Also, other things that they're talking about is what type of benefits would those agents be able to provide, or those service providers be able to provide to student athletes. Okay, would it be free vacations? Would it be able to be meals? Those kind of things, since they are a client. It would kind of depend on what that particular agent has provided to all of their clients. If it's available to all their clients, then is it also available to the student athlete? Okay, a lot of that's another thing that's trying to be worked out in this particular space here. NCAA proposal 2029. This is dealing with a third-party administrator and having somebody who's, I guess, the body overseeing it all. Okay, this would require student athletes to disclose all of their name, image, likeness deals to the NCAA prior to the student athlete actually signing any deal with a corporate entity or whoever it may be, which I think is a little too restrictive. I'm totally fine with somebody housing all the name, image, and likeness deals for all student athletes. I just don't think that somebody should have to approve those on the front end. Okay, having the NCAA be involved in approving that on the front end, it is a little risky, in my thoughts, from the NCAA side of things, because that could get them into legal trouble. What they had talked about doing is trying to figure out what the going rate is for each student athlete, which again, you can't define what the going rate is for each student athlete. That again is a risky area that can get a lot of issues attached to that. And so that, as far as the whole name, image, likeness stuff, that's kind of the gist of it there. I will also touch upon that there are a lot of companies that are in this space. We've been reached out by anybody and everybody from these name, image, and likeness companies, or people who are wanting to assist the institution and assist the student athletes with the whole name, image, and likeness process. There's a lot of them out there. If that is something that you and your campus are looking at doing, I would highly suggest that you sit on a call with them, obviously, learn more about them, and make sure you do your due diligence. The NCAA still hasn't really given us any guidelines on how these groups that we have helping us as institutions, how they can also help out the student athletes. Okay, there are some companies out there that are trying to get deals for student athletes. So if an institution is employing that particular group, and they're going out and getting deals for student athletes. That's an indirect correlation, and then that's the institution ultimately helping out the student athletes with getting names like these deals, which would go against what the NCAA has proposed at this point. So a lot of things to be worked out there. And you just have to pay attention to the news, especially here in the next couple of months, because that's where all these changes are going to be taking place. Some other interesting topics, I guess, is the Alston case. If you've been dealing with this at all or hearing about this at all, this would not permit, I should have changed that word to more so require conference office or institutions to provide educational benefits to student athletes. Okay. This is a long drawn out case, and essentially what it would do is it would require institutions to provide student athletes. Right now it's just in the sports of football and basketball, which is probably going to get you in some Title IX issues there. But what it would do, or what it would require, is each institution to provide to those individuals a max value. I think it was like $5,900 a year, based off of their academic performance. So if a school were to say each semester, fall and spring semester, if you remain eligibility, you can get $2,500 in the fall and $2,500 in the spring. Okay, those kind of things are what they would be working out with this. So there's a lot of things that still have to be worked out with it. It's still on trial, and they're supposed to be meeting about that, I think, in a couple of weeks here. I think it's the end of the month, actually. To dive into this a little bit more, but that's also something to keep on your radar as an interest, as a sport in the sports area here. Let's see here. COVID-19 impacts for the academic center staff. So what I touched upon, if you're in my last session, this was essentially the same thing, is just how bad COVID-19 has impacted everything around us. Essentially a year ago, the world was just put upside down, and we had to navigate around it. I know here at LSU, we had figured out that we would just, it was right around the time of spring break, so we just give the kids 2 weeks off instead of 1 week off, and then essentially we'd be back on campus, and that just didn't happen. We all had to resort to different ways of learning and communicating with people, and it wasn't in person anymore. It was through this Zoom stuff or FaceTime and all those kind of things. And for students and student athletes, it was a huge adjustment, especially for those individuals who came in as mid-year enrollees and were here for essentially 2 months, and then had to get kicked out to go do everything online. As far as learning and tutoring sessions, that was a huge adjustment for everybody. I think we did pretty well, but there were some issues. There's still some things that need to be worked out with it. But with that, virtual tutoring sessions, that was new for everybody. That's been an adjustment. Virtual classes, don't know what your campus is like, but we're hoping to be back in the fall with in-person classes. We don't know how it's going to actually be, but that's something that we're hopeful for. Internet issues during this whole COVID time period. There's been a lot of individuals who have had limited access to internet, so that has hurt their opportunity at attending classes and tutoring sessions and things like that. And then just student athletes contracting COVID. That does put them down for a couple days, sometimes a couple weeks, and at that time they're not really able to do any coursework, any tutoring sessions or anything like that. So they just fall further and further behind. And then by the time the end of the session happens or the course ends, they're just in a tough spot. So therefore the NCAA has kind of put out some flexibility there for institutions to apply waivers. Okay, so based on the academic performance of the student, if there was some way, shape, or form that's tied to COVID, there's flexibility there for the institution to apply for a waiver through the NCAA to help them out with that. And then lastly, this whole shift has just drained people. The mental health is a strong area of that. I know for us anyway, we've had student athletes that were here at the early part of June, and they didn't get to go home for the first time until Christmas. We have some student athletes still haven't been able to go home yet. So those kind of things play a factor into the student athlete's performance, not only on the playing field, but also in the academic area. So we got to be cognizant of that and make sure that we're taking care of these individuals, providing them the mental health resources that they need if they're having sleep issues, if there's depression. There's some student athletes who say, hey, like, I've been in a bubble since June, and I'm scared to get out of that bubble. Those kind of things play effect into student athletes, and so it's good for y'all to kind of pay attention to what's going on with the student athletes. And if there's something that you see or diagnose that just says, hey, like, this student athlete is struggling, make sure that they see somebody about that, whether that's a psychiatrist or a mental health resource person, whatever it is, to try to figure out how you can best help these student athletes navigate through this tough time in everybody's life, as we get through this COVID-19 pandemic. If anybody has any questions, I will certainly take those now. I know this was supposed to be kind of a Q&A session, so I at least just wanted to start out with some of the baselines here with the name, image, and likeness stuff. But anybody have questions?
So I have one here. You mentioned how institutions aren't really allowed to discuss or promote, I don't know about discuss or promote, but like make connections for these student athletes to use your name, image, likeness. Now, like, we see graphics everywhere now when it comes to recruiting and social media. Is that something they're allowed to kind of mention in there? Like, on average, the average for our program was this, or like, this is how much our guys made this semester. Like, are they allowed to promote that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so it was keeping that in the recruiting room. That's a very good question. That's how you would be able to present it to prospective student athletes, is saying that on average, or our top wide receiver, this is what they were able to get. So we could probably see something similar to this for you, and kind of lay that out, what they received doing brand ambassadorships, what they received doing camps and clinics, all those kind of things. Yeah, exactly right. That's how you'd be able to navigate around that and include that as part of the recruiting process. Because there are student athletes or prospective student athletes and their family members who are very curious on how this whole thing works, and they just don't want to be caught off guard by institutions, and they don't want to be taken advantage of in any way, shape, or form. So they kind of want to understand it so they can make an educated decision on, am I fine going out to California? Can I do the same thing in Louisiana? Can I go to Alabama and do the same thing? Whatever it is, there's going to be a lot of pressure on these institutions to help these student athletes out in any way, or prospects kind of understand how it all works and how it can be beneficial to them at each of those particular institutions. What else y'all got? That's it?
I guess I had another. You got it. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was say also during this time, I was going to share my screen real quick with the link for the survey after this session. But y'all are more than welcome to continue to have questions during while this is up.
Hey, Gavin, you got another one?
Yeah. So I know this is kind of tying in something else too, but with NIL coming up and then the one-time transfer rule coming up, something that has given me a couple thoughts here is, like, you talked about the ability to have an agent. Like, what's that going to do for college athletics? I think that's just going to completely flip it around. Is there any, like, not precautions, but any conversations going on right now to kind of navigate through that, like, specific case?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of conversations that are going on about it. They had a meeting last week dealing with the whole transfer stuff, and again, they delayed that until next week. They hope to have another conversation on it. I think there's a lot of scared coaches out there in a lot of sports. So the sports that have the one-time transfer exception, they've kind of just dealt with it. Okay, now you're dealing with the power plays. You're dealing with the baseball, the basketballs, the footballs, those kind of sports. So their approach to it is a lot different. But it does raise those red flags for agents to start assisting these prospective, or these student athletes, excuse me, trying to figure out a new home for them if they're not having playing time and that sort of thing, or they're just unhappy, or, hey, I can get you a better deal out here for name, image, likeness, so let's move out this way, those kind of things. Yeah, that is a huge concern for coaching staffs and for institutions in that particular realm, especially once you open this up to a one-time transfer exception where there's really no clause for the student athletes to transfer anywhere. It's almost a free agency at that point, and the recruiting process would never stop. If you lose a recruit to a particular institution, there's nothing to say that your coaches can't continue to recruit that kid because of the fact that there is a one-time transfer exception, and that's kind of where the scare happens there. The NCAA does have some legislation where once a kid signs a national letter of intent, or once they're on campus at another institution, that you can't have any communication with them. But coaches are smart when they want to be, right? They can kind of find ways to navigate around that. And if that's talking to high school coaches or whatever it is, there's always ways to get into the student athlete or to deliver a message to a student athlete. So there's a lot of those fears that would happen there. Each conference also has legislation currently, and just talking specifically with the SEC, we have some legislation here, which one requires a student athlete who is transferring into the SEC to have at least 2 years of eligibility left. And if you're transferring from an SEC school to an SEC school, you have to sit out a year. Okay, so once this NCAA proposal goes through, which we know it will, the NCAA has to approve it. I don't think there's a way that they can not approve it. And so once they approve it, then the SEC has to go in and clean up their regulations. And it could get real interesting if you could transfer from one SEC school to another SEC school without having to sit out.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That's what I've been kind of just researching. I just finished up my career as a student athlete and then right into this world. And so it's like everything that's kind of going through my head. It's always something. And I'm always interested to get the perspective of other people. So I really appreciate that. I guess I'm hogging it all here. One thing is have they looked into, agent interferences at all? Like with recruiting, we kind of talk about boosters a little bit. Like, is there something in the lines of like agents kind of trying to bring their guys to like different schools that they like, and if they have different student athletes of recruits in high school, are they going to try to steer them in one direction? Is that something?
Exactly. There's a lot of fear in that as well. Anytime you get agents involved or financial advisors, marketing reps and stuff like that, there's a lot of fear there. Baseball already kind of has those individuals in place because those kids get essentially drafted out of high school. Some of them do. And at that point, they have to make a decision on, do I go pro or do I go to college and spend at least the next 3 years there before I can get drafted again? So those individuals are already kind of in play there, and they've kind of navigated that area as much as they can permissibly at this point. But it gets a little hairy there. Now you bring football into that, and you bring basketball into that, and that just kind of opens eyes for a lot of people. And to be honest with you, anytime there's a change, even just a significant change, there's fear from a lot of people. Now you have this huge change, so the increase in fear has just went through the roof. So yeah, agents and their involvement in this whole thing, it's going to be dicey. I'll say that. I don't know if you have them in the market, it's going to be hard to. It's going to be a hard area to control. That's for sure.
So I had a question to chime in if that's all right. If anybody else didn't have a question, I had a question.
Yep. Hang on one second. I need to increase my volume here.
Oh no, that might be me.
There it is. There it is.
Speak up. Are we clear?
I can hear you now. Yep.
Okay. Good deal. So first of all, thank you so much for the presentation, Matthew. I feel really more so enlightened about name, image, and likeness before, up until today. So thank you for that presentation. It was very, very thorough, and I did my survey. But my question that I would just ask to you is, has there been anything that's come out in regards to student athletes having their own podcast? Have you heard anything about name, image, and likeness around student athletes and creating their own podcast platforms?
Yep. So we actually have a few student athletes. One right now that I have helped out this year, and she does have her own podcast and is able to do that. And having her own podcast, she has to remove herself from being a student athlete. She can't say that she's a student athlete. She can't say that she's an LSU student athlete. She can't do any of those types of things. It's something that's actually just removed from it. So she just can represent her name, and that's really it. She can't use her social media account that has several hundred followers on it. She can't use that to promote it at all. She had to make a new social media account just with the podcast on it, and she could not use that primary, I'll say primary social media account. She can't use that one to retweet anything. Okay, so they're very restrictive in what they can and can't do. And the flexibility needs to be open for these student athletes to be able to use their name, image, likeness in that particular case. But yes, to answer your question, student athletes will be able to do podcasts and those types of things as well.
Okay, excellent. I was just curious on that, on the clarity there. Thank you so
Yep.
much.
Absolutely.
I think Katie also had a question.
Yeah, I just dropped it in the chat, but you were mentioning like the concern of agents and their involvement in the name, image, likeness process.
Yep.
Has there been any discussion in regards to like social media specialists or marketing representatives, and if that's going to be allowed, or if that still falls sort of under the same umbrella as an agent?
Yes, I was trying to touch upon it, and there's a lot of these companies that are out there right now, and they're trying to get in with institutions to help them with navigating around this. And as part of their platform is they would help out with student athletes' social media accounts. They'd help out with trying to get them endorsement deals. They try to help out in any way, shape, or form with these student athletes. And right now, the NCAA is saying that that is not going to be permissible. If institutions do employ these individuals or these companies, they cannot help student athletes get endorsement deals in any way, shape, or form. I think, is that answer your question, or was
Yeah,
there?
and then just sort of a follow-up, because my background is actually like journalism and communication. I'm actually getting a master's in digital social media. So I'm just curious too, there's a lot of classes out there where like they maybe partner with a company. And so it's academic wise, they're partnering with a company. So let's say maybe the company in this class is a student athlete. Is that something that you think the NCAA or an institution would allow? So then the athlete is getting that help that they need, but there's not necessarily any extra benefits because it's open up to another company as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Katie. What the NCAA is going to allow is they're going to allow us to provide education to these student athletes so that they can go out and do their own name, images, likeness deals. The kind of areas that we're touching upon with these student athletes, or what we think is important, is one, time management. That's huge for these kids because there's a lot of commitment to these particular I guess appearances and dealing with this name, image, likeness, and having to go out and do stuff for individuals. So the time management piece, the financial literacy, a lot of student athletes, they just don't know, they don't know how to control their money. So that could be an issue. We're looking at ways to help them with reading contracts or things to look at in contracts, because if they do get into a situation where they sign a contract and it's something that they were told that is not the case, then they're up a creek there with that. There's a lot of other areas too that you got to help these student athletes out with too, like brand management, in trying to help them build their brand, or at least understand what is a brand and how can you grow that, and then like brand ambassador education and all those things. So as long as we keep it in the realm of education, you're exactly right, we can do that. It's just more so if you're using those companies to also assist student athletes with going out and getting deals.
Thank you.
Anything else? That's it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. Hopefully you guys have had a great time here, and hopefully you guys continue on have a great time with this I guess virtual session that you guys are having. What is this thing called again, Jonathan? What's the seminar called?
Oh, the Academic Center Student Support Summit.
There you go. Hopefully, hope you guys continue on and have a great time with that the rest of the day. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to somebody in the Academic Center. We can assist you with anything that you all need, or anybody else that's on your campus is obviously able to do that as well. So thank you all for taking the time today, and enjoy your weekend. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.